Well, welcome students. It's great to be here with you, and I want to thank the IOC for making this whole event possible. What we're going to be talking about today is the impact of work time on well-being in the workplace and outside the workplace. And I want to start with a little story. Back in 1968, when I was in college at the University of Wisconsin studying sociology, I was told that by the year 2000, there would be this big social problem that we sociologists were going to have to help solve. And this problem was going to be too much leisure time. That with all automation and all these labor-saving devices that we have, we were going to be able to produce things so fast that we'd have about 15 to 20 hours of work a week, and we'd have 7 to 10 weeks of vacation a year, and we would all have so much leisure time in our hands, we wouldn't know what to do with it. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a problem I can deal with. But that isn't the problem we got. And in fact, today we are working generally longer hours in the workplace than we were in 1968. I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem for our health. I think that's a problem for our families. I think that's a problem for our communities, even for our environment. And I'll talk a little bit about those things. So the point I want to make today is that if we want to change and improve our workplace, one place we need to think about starting is reducing our working hours and increasing our holidays. When we think about work time, we usually think about working a lot so that we can produce a lot more and therefore increase this thing we call the gross domestic product. This is sort of the be-all and end-all of how we measure things economically in our society and tell ourselves whether we're doing well or not. Now, there's a problem with this whole GDP idea because it measures many things as good things that aren't necessarily good things. So if you have a big oil spill, that actually adds more to the GDP than if the oil makes it safely to the refinery, because you have all these cleanup costs, you have legal bills. Same thing if you have cancer or diseases. A lot of money is spent to deal with these things. When money is spent, the GDP goes up. In fact, Bobby Kennedy, back in 1968, when he was running for president, made a speech at the University of Kansas in which he said, the GDP measures, in short, everything except that which makes life worthwhile. So we kind of need another way of telling ourselves whether we're doing well. And a little country way over in Asia, between big China and big India, a little country called Bhutan, has come up with a different way of measuring well-being, and they call it gross national happiness. Back in 1972, their 16-year-old king, upon his coronation, was asked by an Australian reporter, "So King, what are you going to do to increase the country's gross national product or gross domestic product?" And the king thought about that for a second and he said, "Well, sir, with all due respect, I think that gross national happiness is more important than gross national product." So kids say the darndest things, but this guy was the king after all, and people paid attention to him. And so he brought all kinds of experts to his little country of Bhutan, psychologists, sociologists, people trying to figure out what indeed makes us happy, what indeed adds to well-being. And they concluded that there were really 9 key domains or areas of life that were important for well-being, and those include material well-being, which we measure with GDP. You've got to have a certain amount of this kind of material prosperity to have a good life. But it's only one of 9 things. The other things include physical health, mental health, social support and community, social connection, and this is really huge, I will argue, education, arts, culture, recreation, all the things connected with that, a clean and good environment and access to nature, a government that is transparent and democratic, and finally, time balance, or what we think of as work-life balance. And I'm maintain that this is an extremely important part of well-being for people. Now, I've been involved for a number of years with a project called the Happiness Initiative. You can go to their website, happycounts.org, And you can take a 15-minute survey in which you kind of discover how well you are doing in each of these key domains of well-being. And we add one more, work satisfaction, because the Gallup organization has shown how important that is also for well-being. So you can take that survey and you can see how you do as an individual, but you can also see how the 50,000 other people who have taken the survey have done. And one thing you will see is that the lowest scores come in time balance. That is the case because we are, particularly in this society, very, very stressed and pressed for time. We are working long hours and we have little opportunity for rest. It is, though, a problem in most of the rich and industrial countries of the world, and it affects many, many people. Why does time balance matter for well-being? Well, there's a lot of evidence that people who have good work-life balance, who are not stressed all the time, are happier. And the evidence from the Gallup organization's international polling shows that the world's happiest countries all have actually the world's shortest working hours. You can think here of Denmark, #1 country in most of the polling, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and so forth. These are countries where people work about 200, 300, even 400 hours less each year than Americans do. They also have workplaces that are more egalitarian, that sort of share power, organization, and control to a greater degree. And so when people have both control and they don't work all the time, they are happier and they are healthier. When people have very little control in their jobs and they are working long, long hours, they tend to be candidates for a heart attack. I think we are looking at this point in our society in a rather rapid increase in the takeover of jobs globally by machines, by robots, and so forth. The new computer revolution has allowed this to such a degree that some estimates are that we may lose as many as half of the jobs in the American workforce to robotization and computerization in the next 20 years alone. And this is not simply happening in the United States, it's happening around the world, and even in the developing countries like China and India, where factories are increasingly, even that kind of work is increasingly being taken over by machines. So when we face this, it's something that we haven't quite faced before. We've always had a way to create new jobs when we've lost old ones. Maybe we can still do that to a degree, but the evidence is not clear. And we have to think about, are there other ways that we can deal with the problems of increasing unemployment and the potential for unemployment without simply having to produce more and more and more stuff, and therefore straining an already strained environment and the resources that we have. So this is a dilemma we're facing. And the argument, I think, is that one important way to reduce unemployment, to put people to work in a way that is a win-win situation for the workers, the environment, and many other things, is to reduce unemployment through sharing work and through shorter work. We have a history of this in the United States, particularly beginning in the 1930s. On April the 6th, 1933, the United States Senate actually passed a bill that would have made the official work week in the U.S. 30 hours with any more overtime. That bill did not make it through the House of Representatives, and eventually our official work week became 40 hours. But the idea, even then, 80-some years ago, was that we could work 30 hours and produce the things that we needed. Now, the bill didn't pass, but the Kellogg's Corporation and many other companies actually went to a 6-hour day, 30-hour work week in the 1930s. So Kellogg's in 1930 actually began its 30-hour work week with 6-hour days, 5 days a week. It found, in fact, that workers were so productive in the new situation that within a few years' time, 2-3 years' time, Kellogg's was able to pay its 30-hour workers as much as they had paid them for 40 hours before. They expanded their employment in Battle Creek, where Kellogg's is located, by some 400 employees during that time. And it was a very, very popular program, and it extended altogether until 1985, when finally the increase in the benefits packages being part of the work package made Kellogg's feel like it was cheaper to hire fewer people and make them longer hours, make them work longer hours. But this was a very successful program. I had the opportunity in Battle Creek to talk to many of the workers who participated in that. They talked about how much more fun it was coming to work, how loyal they felt to the company, how much it meant in their communities, how much lower crime was because people were there for the community, how men talked to me about in the days before women's liberation, feeling that they were like part of their kids' schooling and would help out at school. Volunteerism, all of those things were up in the community. So this was a marvelous experience which showed that it actually can be done. And it certainly was also good for health, which was something the folks at Kellogg were very concerned about. Now there's a similar experience with shorter hours that occurred just a couple of years ago in a place called Amador County, California. This is a small county, about 60,000 people, and in 2009 the state of California was facing an immense budget shortfall of about $35 billion. And so the state began paying less money to its counties, and the counties were taking a 10% hit. And so the county supervisors in Amador County decided that they would reduce everybody's work week. They would have people work only 4 days a week, 9 hours a day, and they would close down county institutions on Friday. The workers were aghast at this because they were going to lose 10% of their pay. They'd be working 36 hours instead of 40, and they would lose 10% of their pay. They were angry, they were demonstrating, they were protesting, but the county supervisor said, no, we don't want to lay people off, and if we don't do it this way, we will have to lay people off. And so they said, we're going to do it this way, but 2 years from now, you guys can vote on this. If we still have to do it, if we still don't have the money, you can decide whether you want to keep this 4-day work week at less pay, or whether you want to go back to a 5-day week and we lay some people off. And so two years later, when the time came and the money still was not there, the workers were asked to make a decision. The same workers who had screamed about this situation voted 71% to 29% to stay on the shorter work week at less pay. And when I talked to some of those people, they said, well, I never knew what it was, but suddenly I had Fridays off. I could go fishing. I could run errands when my kids were in school. Then I had the whole weekend free with my family. I got used to the 10% pay cut, but I don't want to give up the time. And I think this says something about how this impacts us. Now, it's important to understand that this kind of program can also be extremely good for productivity and for business. There's an October 2009 issue of the Harvard Business Review, which contains an article called Making Time Off Predictable and Required, written by Leslie Perlow, a professor at the Harvard Business School. She did an extensive study with the Boston Consulting Group, separating that group into two key sections, one of whom continued working long hours, 50, 60 hours a week, working into the night, being constantly on call digitally, expected to answer phone calls, emails, and things late. They didn't take a lot of their vacation. Sometimes when they took their vacation, again, they were tied digitally to the company. The other group in the company was asked to finish work on time, not work into the night. It was allowed in exceptional cases, emergencies, to make calls or to people, but this was kept to a minimum. They were encouraged to take all their vacation time and really take vacation, not be constantly checking their emails. And what the study found was that, not surprisingly, this was very good for workers' health. They were healthier. They suffered less illnesses during the period. They were also much happier with their jobs. There was less turnover. But the two things that were unexpected were that they also actually ended up producing more total output than the workers who were on doing it the other way. And finally, they all said that they had better communication with their work teams under this circumstance. Not being always available, they actually had to sit down with each other and prioritize things to get them working. So I think that's a very important evidence, and there are many others, that this is not just good for people's health or good for unemployment. It actually makes us more productive. So now I'd like to go outside the workplace and talk a little bit about the implications of shorter work time for people's well-being and for the well-being of our society as a whole. I think one of the most important places where we can look at the effect of shorter work time is the country of the Netherlands, where people actually work the shortest hours of any nation on earth, and where parents actually have an option of cutting their work time back and keeping their jobs. They get paid a little bit less and their benefits are prorated, but they really have this option and it's encouraged. So more people in the Netherlands work part-time than in any other country, and part-time jobs are actually desired. They're not considered kind of a negative thing the way they are in the United States. Now, one impact of this is that the Netherlands has the happiest parents and the happiest kids in the world, according to a great number of studies. The most famous is the UNICEF report called Child Well-Being in Rich Countries, which was issued last year, 2013. It looks at 29 rich countries in the United States and ranks the well-being of children in those countries in 6 separate categories, including health, including education, risky behaviors, the children's own assessment of their well-being, their poverty levels, and so forth. And in that survey, UNICEF found that the Netherlands ranked number 1 in 4 out of the 6 categories, and by far number 1 country in the world, also had the highest self-reported happiness among its children. Now, I am very sad to say that my own country, the United States, ranked 26th out of 29 countries in that survey of the well-being of children, with only Latvia, Lithuania, and Romania scoring below us. We ranked 23rd when it came to children's own self-reported happiness. One of the things that makes this true is that parents in the United States tend to be very stressed, and that stress really rubs off on children. And one of the things is the amount of overwork and the lack of time. And we sometimes push that off into our kids, because now we're trying to get our kids also scheduled constantly. They're one thing to the next to kind of fit into this kind of thing. But the impact of this is, I think, very problematic. Another researcher, Wagner, who was working in the Netherlands and the United States, did a survey of parents for satisfaction using 6 key areas of life, and found that in 5 of the 6, the Dutch parents were far more satisfied with their lives and with their family lives than the American parents. And clearly, it is having time for your kids that makes such an important impact here. I would argue, and I'm not alone in this, that overwork and the stress from overwork is what my friend Sarah Speck, who's a prominent cardiologist, calls the new tobacco in America. In fact, Sarah says that if you actually look at the impact of workplace stress, of these constant demands on time and the sense that people have that they are hurried, and you look at what happens in the arteries and stuff, you can see a pattern that is very similar to what happens when people smoke too much, from nicotine and so forth. So she refers to workplace stress as the new tobacco. And she says that she is seeing this more and more today even than 5 or 10 years ago, as people are feeling greater pressures to have to produce, to constantly be on call, to look at the digital devices all the time and do what's expected. She says that, in fact, she is seeing, as a cardiologist now, the great number of cases of heart attacks in people in their 40s and 50s rather than in their 60s and 70s, which was the case when she became a cardiologist 30 years ago. So that's some really key evidence that health is impacted and that we can have better health if we shorten work time and reduce stress and give people these opportunities in the workplace. In fact, we now know that the United States spends about twice as much money as other rich countries on average on health care, and has arguably some of the worst results. Lowest life expectancy, for example, highest rates of obesity, and other kinds of things. The environmental impact is another central I think, impact of overwork in our society that could be positively affected if we were to think about even slowly reducing hours of work and giving people more breaks in the form of vacations and other things. This has been studied extensively by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency using the Chalmers School of Technology, or Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden, to do the research. And what that research has found is that when people work somewhat less than 40 hours, they are not only happier and certainly more content with their work lives, they also produce considerably fewer greenhouse gas emissions, which are the primary cause of climate change, and they have much smaller ecological or environmental footprints, the amount of resources and other things that they use. So the Swedish EPA has actually really been promoting the idea of shorter work as one of the answers to the issue of climate change. This evidence was so convincing that the city of Gothenburg, Sweden, where Chalmers University of Technology is located, has now officially gone to a 30-hour, 5-day, 6-hour work week. Seeing that, we don't know the results of that yet because it's brand new, but I suspect that the results will be very good. I think also having time for other things besides just work and the stress of that will give us time to be better citizens, to understand better the issues out there, to be smarter voters, all of those kind of things. So in the last part of this presentation, I want to talk positively because I think there's some real reasons for hope. I think we are starting to get this larger message, and it is beginning to work its way into the American business system, and I think into business systems and organizations around the world. But I probably am more familiar with what's happening here in the United States. Now, one of the good signs in all of this is that many prominent business leaders are now saying that it would be good for business, for health, for everything in our society if we worked a little less. So people like Richard Branson, Virgin America, promoting longer vacation time, more breaks for workers. Larry Page, the founder and principal in Google, has made a talk in which he said that going to a 34-day work week might be the best thing we could do in the United States in many, many ways to help business and to help our society as a whole. We are seeing now a new rise in corporate promotion of the idea of people really taking and getting vacation time. One of the things that troubles me is that in the United States we have the shortest vacations in the rich world, an average of about 2 weeks compared to 4 to 6 in the countries in Europe and so forth. And we also have a situation in which about a quarter of American workers don't get any vacation time, at least paid vacation time, and many more give back many of the days that they actually get and leave those days on the table. So business leaders are beginning to be aware that this is not a good idea, that having people stressed, having people face in the office when they're dead tired is not a great idea for business in many, many ways. It increases health costs, it increases turnover, it decreases worker productivity. So they are saying, let's take longer vacations. Let's take breaks that matter. So we have Hotels.com, one of those companies, actually promoting now what it calls its vacation equality campaign to say that we need a law in America that would really mandate at least some paid vacation time for everybody, like every other rich country in the world does. We have the Diamond Resorts International, many other companies saying, yes, we should really be promoting vacation time. Diamond did a poll through the Nielsen Corporation, for example, which found that workers who regularly take vacations on average have about 71% job satisfaction compared to a 46% job satisfaction for workers who don't regularly take vacations. And so they are promoting this idea. And then the Wall Street Journal recently reported that businesses in the United States, a number of them, even big businesses, are starting to pay workers to take their vacations. Because it's not just that the business doesn't give the vacation, in many cases the workers are not taking it. And so some companies are finding that they actually need to give bonuses and say, here's some money, get out the door and do it. Now, the Europeans have been doing this for a long time. They have, in many countries, extra vacation pay. So you actually get more money during the month that you're going to take vacation, because they understand that it costs you something to take vacation, and it's a way to make sure that people do that and that they get the benefit of that. So I think those are really positive trends in the United States. I see them happening. They're not yet necessarily the majority, and many workers are still holding back, but I think we need to do that. There's some other important policies to encourage shorter work time in other countries in the world. One of those is a policy called Kurzarbeit. The Germans used this policy to actually sharply reduce their unemployment when the financial crisis hit in 2009. So what the Germans did was they said to companies in Germany, look, reduce your work time. Don't lay anybody off, but reduce their hours. May have them work 4 days a week or something like that. And we will use our unemployment funds to top up the salaries that are cut from those workers. So if the workers work 4 days a week, make 80% of pay, we'll up that to 90 by using unemployment benefits. They actually found that they saved money on unemployment by not having some people become completely unemployed. Those people were around when the economy picked up again to work, and the whole idea has been very, very successful, and there have been some interest in that in other countries. The law in the Netherlands, which has created so much willingness to do part-time work, is called the Hours Adjustment Act. It was introduced in 2000. And what it says is that as an employee in the Netherlands, you can go to your employer and you can say, I would like to work less. I want to work 4 days a week or 3. If you have some concern, like you have small children and so forth, you might do this. Now, the law says that the employer is required to actually let you do that unless they show that there would be a financial hardship for the firm. And that very rarely happens. So in over 90% of the cases, these requests are granted. Now the workers make less. They're reduced in salary by the amount less that they work. But their benefits are prorated. They keep their health care and they keep the possibility of promotion. So many of them do this, and I have friends there who have said, wow, this actually is just a great thing, because I'm at a time in my life where the time is more important to me than the money. I need time with my kids and so forth. And it pays off for the businesses as well, because they have happier employees, healthier employees, and employees who want to stick around and have loyalty. In Belgium, it's common now to have sabbaticals every 5 years or so of a number of months for all workers, not just, for example, academic workers. And this is also found, it doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but it's much great expansion of the way we think of it here, and it's a huge benefit for many people. In Australia, the country actually encourages even further extended vacations, because in Australia you can take up to a month off at full pay and keep your job. You get that as a right, a vacation right, but you could take 2 months off at half pay. And many Australians will do this so that they have a longer period of time. It allows them to travel to other countries and so forth. So I think there are many possibilities that we can use to improve time balance and work-life balance in the workplace, that by doing so we will be making a difference for our health, for our communities, and we'll be better workers. It's just a win-win-win situation. It's not rocket science, and we have for too long forgotten about this. We need more research to see what works best and just how much time, but it's a direction we ought to be going. And you, as students, I would say, when you go into the workplace, one of the things to ask for is, how much time am I going to have? Am I going to have some vacation time? Don't just go for the contract that pays you the most money, because you will find that there are other things that you miss out on in life and other impacts that are not so good if your focus is solely on the money. And as students who have degrees and have skills, you will be able to do some negotiating with your employers. So think about, when you're doing that, how important is time and health and all of these things to me in my life, and argue for them. I want to finish with a little story. I want to take you back 100 years in time to the winter of 1912, January 11th, when thousands of workers, most of them women, and 80% of them immigrants speaking a babble of about 25 different languages, left the textile mills of Lawrence, Massachusetts, and went on strike, demanding an increase in their pay of 2 cents an hour more, from 16 to 18, and a decrease in their work hours from 56 to 54. And as they marched in the streets, the story goes that these women carried in front of them a banner which read, "We want bread and roses too." And the bread was the symbol of money. In fact, getting that little bit extra money would mean 4 more loaves of bread on their tables each week. But even as poor as they were, these women understood that they needed more than money. They needed health, they needed art, they needed love, they needed beauty, and for those things they needed time. They needed time to smell the roses. So the roses were the symbol of shorter work time. And I think for many, many years, we've understood that both of these things are important, not one without the other. But after World War II, as we came into the full flowering of the consumer society and the idea that more stuff and more consuming was what we really wanted to do and was more important than anything else, I think we allowed the roses to wilt, and I think it's time to water them again. Thank you.